Earlier this week, I posted a video about becoming an assistant principal and gave you ways that you could try to leverage your marketability in that area. Today, I'm going to give you some actual questions I use to hire assistant principals. I've been in school administration and district administration for 22 years, and I've hired many assistant principals. So I'm using the actual questions that I used and giving you an answer that I would be looking for in that question. Question number one: what qualifications or experience do you have that would make you an effective assistant principal? This open-ended type question is your time to shine. You want to talk about what type of leadership skills that you've been given in your school, if you shadowed your principal, any of your coursework that you found was extremely helpful, any that will show what you can give to the school. And go back and watch the video before. It'll give you some ideas as well. Okay. What task would you expect to perform as an assistant principal? Now, we all know assistant principal handles things such as books, buses, discipline. Yes, most assistant principals, that's part of their role. But what I would listen for is, how are you going to impact the instruction in my building? Therefore, you need to talk about, as the leader, just as in my classroom, student achievement is first to me. I want to make sure every student in the building is learning. I know how to dig through data. I've done it for my own students. I know how to come up with an individual plan for students to help them when they're behind or when they're excelling. I know how to meet my students where they are. Instruction is my number one goal. And then I would also know that not only would I be dealing with instruction and teacher evaluation, which is highly related to instruction, I would also be dealing with parents, students, maybe some discipline problems. I would be doing whatever I needed to do to help our school be successful. That's the most important part. Okay, number three: how would you handle a situation where a parent has continually complained about their child's teacher and has repeatedly asked you to move him or her to another room? This happens quite often. Parents get upset about something, and their first response is, my child's not happy. They don't want to come to school. I want them moved out of Miss X's room or Mr. Jones's room. I don't want them in that classroom anymore. Well, if you do that, you open Pandora's box if you start moving children. In my 22 years, I think there were 2 children that I moved. And truly, it was a situation in both those cases where there was a psychologist involved. We had tried everything else and nothing else was working. And truly, it was becoming a burden for the teacher. So I did it as much for the teacher as I did for the student. And so, what I would say in that situation is, well, first of all, I would ask the parent if I could schedule a conference with she and the teacher and myself. And then I would schedule the conference. I would meet with the teacher, find out from his or her point of view, hey, what's going on with this child? So, going into the meeting what the problem is. Then I would tell the teacher, let me lead the conference. You talk when I ask you to talk. And in no time are we going to have a heated argument. If the parent becomes heated, I will stop the meeting and we will resume at a different time. Then, when the parent came in, I would be on my friendliest behavior welcome them in, introduce the teacher to the parent if they haven't met, let the parent air their problem again with the teacher sitting there, let them get it all out, and then I would let the teacher respond only to the parts about factual information, not about you don't like him or Johnny is bothering him. I would want the teacher to give factual information. And then after the teacher had done that, I would say to the parent, now I feel based on our meeting today that we can work together to have a productive year for your child. And I would dismiss the teacher first, and then I would talk to the parent and say, look, I understand that you have some concerns. Let me tell you this teacher and what they are wonderful at and what I've seen in my years of working with him or her. And then I want us to try this plan that we've come up with together. And I'm going to get in that classroom myself personally at least 3 times. And then I'm going to call you and I'm going to tell you what I see and what I feel is working. And then if there's something that needs tweaking, I'm going to tweak that with the teacher. And then we will go from there. Typically, that works wonders. The next question is, how would you respond if a teacher in the school wanted to transfer gossip to you regarding another teacher or staff member? Let's say a teacher came and wanted to tell you that she heard that this teacher was going out with someone or something outside of school. Now, if you've moved up within your school, this can be a touchy situation because these people are used to seeing you as a friend and not as an administrator, but you have to set the tone early. So, how I would answer this question is I would say, well, Jim or Jenny or whomever told you that, you would say, look, I know we've known each other a long time and we've shared stories like this before, and you know, I get why you're telling me because in the past I would have probably really been interested in that. But unfortunately, I've moved to a new role. And so I'm not going to be participating in any conversation about any other staff member in the building. And I know that you're a good enough friend to me that you can respect that. And then I would turn and walk away, is how I would handle it. Another question. If two teachers were having a difficult time getting along, how would you handle the situation to remedy the problem within the parameters of your job description? Let me give you a scenario, and then it'll help you understand the question a little better. Let's say a teacher is always late picking up their kids for music. Well, the music teacher and Miss third grade teacher get into an argument in front of students. They start talking about, you're never on time to pick up your class, and so it puts me behind, and I can't start my next lesson, and on and on and on. And so, of course, you hear about it because maybe you were walking down the hall and actually saw it. If you did see it, I would stop it immediately and I would say, Miss third grade teacher, would you please take your class back? And Miss music teacher or Mr. music teacher, would you please go into your music classroom and start your lesson? And then I would call them to my office one at a time, get their side of the story, write down everything they said, both of them individually, and then I would call them back together. And I would say, we need to resolve this problem. Miss third grade teacher, are you being late to class? Well, yeah, but I was down there working on my lesson plans. I'm really wanting to do well on state testing, and so I was trying to get my math scores up, and I just lost track of time. And then I would say to the music teacher, well, is this the first time that's happened? And of course, you're already going to know that because you've going to have had an individual meeting with them. And if they say, no, this is a pattern, then That's how you address it. You say, well, Miss Third Grade Teacher, I look for patterns. And if you were late one time, that's one thing, but this is a pattern. And Miss or Mr. Music Teacher is correct in that you are messing up the entire school schedule because second grade can't go to music because she can't leave your third graders just standing in the hall and start second grade music. So that's our first problem we need to work on. But secondly, we never ever disagree in front of students. What do you think would be a better way to have handled it? And then I would get the teachers to agree that it would have been better for the music teacher to go to the third grade teacher's room after school and share her frustration, not because of her personally, but because she couldn't get her next lesson going. And that would be the best way to resolve that problem. Okay. Another question I had was what ideas or suggestions would you propose to build teacher or staff morale? And that really could be anything that you would choose to do, but it's something I want you to think about because it could be very well asked in an interview. And it might be put a treat in their box at the end of the 9 weeks, or put up a wall in the lounge, or whatever. You could Google things online, but I just want you to be prepared for that question about what you would do if you were asked to help increase morale. Another question: if a teacher did not meet a deadline that you had given, how would you handle the situation? How would you handle a teacher who refused to cooperate with you? This one happens all the time. And it's the same teachers over and over. And so the way I would say that you should answer that question is first, I would send out an email to everyone who was late getting something turned in. First, I would give a very specific deadline. I want this Friday by 10 o'clock because that way everybody knows at 10:15 it's late. There's no question about it because if you say you want on Friday, it could be Friday anytime. So I would say Friday by 10 o'clock. And so then you would send out an email, let's say at 11, a blind carbon copied email that says, hi, I still need your whatever it is, and it's late, and I need to get my report turned in. Please submit ASAP. Now, that's for a one time thing. And people, most of the time, you're people that it was a one off, they're going to email you right back, oh, Miss So and so, I am so sorry. I'll never let this happen again. And it won't. But there are those who don't listen. And so then the next time you send out something, that person's late again. Well, this time it's escalated because now they're being disrespectful and they're being defiant. So I would have a conversation with them in my office at that point. I would say, hi, I've noticed that when we have something due, you are always on my list of late people. Now, you're a wonderful math teacher, and I know you get busy and you're focused, and I appreciate that because student achievement is number one, but I also have things I have to do. And I have deadlines. So if central office wants something at 1 o'clock, I have to have it by 10 from you so I can give them my report. And you are causing me to be late with mine if I don't have your materials. I would then tell them the next time will be a letter of directive because being late is important and it should not be happening. All right. The next question: part of your responsibilities as an assistant principal would be teacher evaluation. Describe to me your idea of a superior teacher. Now, what I would do on that one is I would take your state's evaluation model, whatever model is used in that school. If it's different from the school you're in now, you go and look up their model. It's usually the same across the state. And you see what is it that the state is saying is a great teacher? What are the things they're looking for? I would include a lot of those things. And then I would also include things that typically are on the professionalism rubric, like how do you get along with your peers, or how do you work with parents, and include some of those things as well. But again, you want instruction to be number one. A superior teacher is one that reaches every child in the classroom. So that's something that you would want to include in your answer. All right. How would you handle an irate parent, one who shows up without an appointment? This happens too. It is kind of similar to the question that we talked about, them wanting their child moved. But this could be about anything. It could be that somebody cut them off in the car rider line and they drive around to the front and they're demanding to see the principal immediately. And so the way I would say that that should be handled is you would, when the secretary lets you know, hey, there's a parent up here, they're very mad, then you need to drop whatever you're doing. If it's like, I've got to go out on bus duty, then you get somebody to cover for you and you call that parent back to your office. Because number one, you want to get them out of the main office because you don't want a scene up there. You don't want other parents seeing an irate parent. So you nicely go up there. Hi, Mrs. Jones, please come back and let's talk about what happened this morning. And then again, you get all the information from the parent and you write it down. When you're writing something down, it shows the parent you're listening and they appreciate that. They know that you're not just saying, yeah, yeah, yeah. You're actually writing down exactly what happened. Now, where was that? Who was out there? Why do you think that happened? Ask them all those types of questions and write down all of their responses. And then say to the parent, I'm so sorry that happened, or you feel that that happened, and I'm going to look into that. I'm going to investigate that situation, and I will get back with you. Now, hopefully, it will be today because I am giving this priority, but sometimes it takes me more than one day to do a full investigation. But I promise by tomorrow, you will hear from me, and I will call you back and let you know what I found out and how we're going to resolve this issue. Because, Miss Jones, we don't want you upset. We want you on our side and we want you to be happy here at our school. And so that's how I would answer that question. And usually the last question is always, tell us what are your strengths and your weaknesses. Strengths, again, go back to question number one, highlight all the things you know that you do so well as a teacher that you can carry on into the role of administration. Now, I want to caution you on what is your weakness. 99% of people will say, I'm too perfectionistic. I don't know what professor told somebody to say that. Do not say it because no one wants to hear that. We've all heard it thousands of times. Every teacher interview, every admin interview. The better answer to that question would be, well, I guess my weakness would be that I've never actually done the job. I feel like I've been well prepared because, I, of course, finished my administrative degree. I had some classes that, I learned ed law. I learned how to evaluate teachers. I learned a lot in that. Not only that, but I worked with my principal. I shadowed my principal to find out, what I could do. I'm also on the leadership team in my school. List all your leadership things that you do. So I feel like I've done everything I can to prepare me, but I'm also smart enough to know that once you accept a new job, it's just like with teaching. When you student taught, you thought you knew what you were doing until you got the job and you were totally responsible. You learned a whole lot more your first year of teaching than you did in student teaching. So I feel like that's how I will be as an assistant principal. Even though I feel I'm very prepared, I feel like I will still learn new things, hopefully things to do, and maybe a few not to do. But I'm also smart enough to know that if I don't know the answer to something, I'm not going out on a limb. I'm going to go to my principal or the other assistant principal and say, hey, I have this situation. I was thinking that I would handle it this way. Is that how you would handle it? So therefore, even in that, you're telling the person, the assistant principal or the principal, that you have an idea, but you just want verification. So I would say that would be my weakness, just that I have not physically done the job. That's just a sampling of some of the questions I ask as a principal, but I've served on several committees in multiple districts, and they all come back around to a lot of scenarios, finding out what would you do, a lot of what makes a good teacher, what are your strengths, your weaknesses, all of those things are going to be asked. So, right now, I would encourage you to take these questions that I've given you and you write out kind of a script of what you would say if someone asked you that question, because it won't be the exact words, but it'll be similar. And then you can say, oh, I remember the question about someone being late turning in things. I can use what I would say I would do in that with this scenario as well. So I hope you got some benefit from that. I hope that you can move into your dream position as an assistant principal. To me, that was the best job I ever did because I didn't have all the responsibility on me, but I enjoyed being in the administrative role. Thank you for watching. My name is Sherry Davidson. I have 22 years of administrative experience. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.